determining the wage. This, I've seen a lot of LMI applications fail on this regard, especially a lot of the ones that people choose to do on their own. They get this refusal letter from Service Canada saying you're not paying people the right wage. And sometimes it is because people don't know where to find the right wages. Sometimes people think it's just like offering whatever wage. And sometimes because it's not just about the median wage, there could be variations to that. So you have to make sure that you explore a lot of different things, okay? So the wage advertised must meet the prevailing median wage for the place of the job. And you're gonna find this in Job Bank. I think for Quebec positions, we'll get to that in a section. In a second, you have a different list where you can find the median wage for those jobs, but anywhere else in Canada, you go to Job Bank, okay? This is going to be a challenge for entry-level positions, and that's why when someone is like a new graduate and they're trying to figure out how to stay in Canada after their post-graduation work permit, and they say, I don't know, my employer might do an LMIA, and then I say, you know what, your employer might want to do an LMIA, but one of the issues is that they're going to have to pay you a median wage. And if you're like in an entry-level position, you're probably not making median wage, and your employer likely does not want to commit to paying you median wage. So that, to begin with, is a big discouragement first, or like a big obstacle if it's an entry-level position, unless the employer wants to pay that. And when it's an entry-level position, again, it's going to be harder to screen for candidates who have the qualifications, because you can't say that you want someone with 3 years of experience if the person doesn't have much experience. And again, it's going to depend on the position. Maybe the client, maybe the employee has like very specific, like very specific qualifications that a lot of other people don't have. In the case of caregivers, I mean, all we ask is for high school, and normally we set it very low. We ask for just 1 year of work experience, and we advertise the wage that we were supposed to be advertising, whether it's not live-in or living out, or whether they're providing them with accommodation or not. And we're still able to be successful in those LMIAs, because it's really it's hard to find people who are willing to work full-time for those wages. If a union states one minimum wage LMIA and another one, and the LMIA and the job bank states another one, which one will prevail? Whichever is highest. So it has to be at least the prevailing median wage. So I would say if the union has their own list and they say that people need to be paid at least $22 per hour, and you find that the median wage is $25 per hour, I would go with the $25 minimum there. If it's the other way, if the median wage is 22, but the union says it's 25, then you go with that. And the other way that you're going to find this out actually is because, and we'll get to this in a second, you need to look at the people who are in the same occupation at the same location. So it could be that the union doesn't say anything about that, but the way that the union has negotiated the contract with the employer are that people who are foremen in this occupation, they make, the lowest is $25, and the one who makes the highest makes, let's say, $30. If the median wage is 22, but the people who are making the lowest is 25, because that's the negotiation that they reach with the union, then you're going to have to offer at least 25. Okay, so it's always whatever is the highest. Another challenging thing is when you have an employee who's going to be working across different places. So sometimes I might have, I don't know, there might be a job that requires travel, but like limited travel. Like, I mean, once in a while you might have to go for business meetings somewhere else. So we might want to advertise, or we might just not want to really include that because it's not like something significant. If there's extensive travel, then we'll include it. And if there's extensive travel and they're going to be working from like different offices for the company, you're going to have to consider the wages at other places. For instance, we've done LMIAs for a ballet company where they were doing shows in Ontario, in BC, in the States, but again, the States didn't concern us. I think they did in Alberta as well. So we had to, whenever they were visiting those, they had to pay them whatever was the median wage there. And if you have someone who's normally going to 2 different places, then you're going to have to pay whatever is the highest. And those LMIs are pretty complicated because, again, you have to make sure that you tap the labor market in those 2 places by probably doing national platforms and stuff like that. And let's say you have an employer who's hiring, is a contractor who's hiring as an employee people who are going to be mobile, who's, I don't know, like, let's say, like an example, a plumber, but the plumber is not going to work from a fixed location, or an electrician, he's going to be driving all around Ontario. So if they're going to be driving, let's say, going to London, going to Hamilton area, going to GTA, and going to the Milton area, you're going to have to look at the median for all those places and go with whichever is the highest. So you cannot offer less than whatever is the highest if they're going to be transiting through different places. If they're going to be all over the province, then maybe just go with either the median for the province or whatever is the highest. So if the one for the GTA is higher than the median for the province, then I would just, for that occupation, then I would simply go for whatever is the highest. So again, if there's a if the person's only going to be in Toronto, you can go with Toronto. If the person's going to be between Ottawa, Toronto, and London has the highest, then go with London as the minimum wage cap for that. Okay. If that's not clear, let me know, because that is definitely important. And again, you need to ask these questions from your employer. And here comes the question that Nicola was asking. In addition to looking at the job bank, you need to look at the employers in the same occupation, in the same location. So if they're in different occupations, that's different. But if in the same occupation, if you're hiring construction workers or like bricklayers, for instance, and there's other people in the same occupation in the same location, you're going to have to ask your employer, okay, how much does the person who make the least make, and how much does the person who make the most make? And then let's say the person who makes the least makes $20, the person who makes the most makes $30, so between 20 and 30. Now the median wage is 18. In that case, median wage 18, the one who makes the lowest at that location makes 20, you have to offer 20. So you have to offer whichever is highest. Now let's say they make between 20 and 30, the ones that they already have. And remember, like, they could be making less than the median because they're not temporary foreign workers. They could be Canadians. You can offer a Canadian whatever you want, as long as it's obviously more than the minimum wage in the province. So let's say that the employees that they have there in the same occupation make between 20 and 30, but the median wage is 22. So you have to offer at least 22. Okay? So that's an important question that you need to ask before you start advertising, because you don't want to start advertising and then find out that people are making more in that company. So it's not just the median. You also want to make sure that you don't bring people to the company who are going to be making more than what you normally pay others. And you can actually, in the ads, and this is actually it's common. Sometimes we do it, sometimes we don't. We advertise a wage range. So we say between $20 and $24 per hour, depending on experience, or subject to experience and qualifications, or a yearly salary between $80,000 and $100,000. That's absolutely fine. You just have to make sure that whatever is the lower end of that wage range, the $80,000 meets the median wage or the people who already work there. If you're offering between $20 and $24 an hour, you have to make that the $20, the lower end of that wage range, is compliant with what you have to advertise. Okay. Even if you're going to be paying the temporary foreign worker more than the median wage, but the lower end that you advertised is below the median wage, those ads are not gonna be good. You're gonna get a refusal. Again, we're just talking about the wage right now, and notice how many technical things go into that. You'll see that this is all about a technical application, no margin for error in LMIA. Okay. Different rules to the workplace is unionized, as we've been talking about. They might actually require a higher wage, so then you'll have, or high compensation with specific benefits, so you have to take that into consideration. And I always advise clients, let's say, for instance, right now remember when we looked at that table of the median wages for the provinces, that they were as of April 29, 2017? I always advise clients that we were very close to the median wage. If it happens to change while we're doing advertising and before we send the application, we might and sometimes even before it's processed, we might have a problem that we don't meet the median wage anymore, and that Service Canada could say, you're going to have to advertise again and send it back to re-advertising. So I always tell clients, if we're right on the line, say, okay, no, why don't we do like 50 cents more, $1 more, so we don't have that problem. Okay. And obviously you have to take into consideration too, Ontario's minimum wage. If unless we get a different government that's going to send things back. Next year it's going to go to 15. Right now it's 14. So if you're around December or November and you start advertising, you should tell your client that they shouldn't be advertising at 14 if that's the median wage for that occupation. You should advertise at 15 because it's going to go up soon. And then there's certain variations to the wage requirements. So I put them there. If you're a pharmacy student, except for Quebec, pharmacy interns, program leaders, instructions, recreation, sport and fitness, camp counselors, in Ontario. So you'll see the list there, or people in the Cold Lake and surrounding communities. Those you'll have to specifically look at what the requirements that they're proposing for. But those, it might not just be the median wage. If a job is in Quebec, then you have to consult that different link that I've provided. Now, this has been something that has been frustrating in the past, is that sometimes you go with the median wage, you follow whatever the rules are in regard to what the employer is paying to people already in the company. You send your application, and I'll give it an example for cooks. And then Service Canada says, yeah, I know that 14 is the minimum, the median wage, but our standards say that you should be paying at least $16 for that location. And then you're just like, well, where are those standards posted anywhere? Well, those are internal guidelines. So that can be a little bit frustrating. That kind of thing you can only learn through experience or through hearing someone talk about it. We have, like, for instance, as lawyers, where if you're a member of the Canadian Bar Association, you're part of a listserv where people are always posting experiences like that. A lot of you might be members of KPIC. I think you have like a similar listserv where people might always be sharing experiences like that. And sometimes that's the only way that you can find. Now, this is rare, but you have to take that into, but I mean, it could happen. And for instance, if I know that could happen with cooks, I think it happens less and less these days, but just be wary. That's the problem of being too close to whatever the median wage is or the minimum provided there. For caregivers, for instance, you'll find that in Ontario, I believe right now the median used to be $11.25 before. Now it's 14 because the minimum wage in Ontario is 14 per hour. If you're not providing accommodation for the caregiver, which is the case in many applications, 14 is not going to do it because it's going to be really hard for someone to be able to pay for accommodation. So I would suggest my client provides more. So provide maybe $16, or provide evidence that this person is going to be staying, I don't know, they're providing them with some sort of accommodation. Or I did an application, for instance, that the woman who was coming to be a caregiver, she was going to be living with her brother and paying like very limited rent, so we provided evidence of that. So factor that into consideration when it's a very low wage, whether people are going to be able to have that. And we'll see when we get to the low wage requirements, low wage position requirements, that there is a requirement that the employer make sure that there's reasonable accommodation where the position is taking place. Okay, before we go into the ads and the specifics of the ads, any questions about the wage? I know some of the stuff, it's a little bit of a mouthful. I want to make sure that those rules are understood correctly. Okay, so let's talk about advertising then. Minimum 4 weeks of advertising unless you're exempt, and there's some exemptions and we'll talk about that. Okay, sorry, Rishi's saying, can the wage be paid in a different currency? What do you think? This is a job in Canada. Do you think you can pay them in a different currency? Most likely not. Like, I mean, this is like, you have to follow whatever requirements are by labor law here. And like, I mean, you can, like, I would say like adjust it to, if I had a client who says like, oh no, we have like wages in US dollars, and like that's, I would say, well, adjust it to a Canadian one. But remember, this is about jobs in Canada. You're hiring someone to work in Canada. Like, this is like, you're getting them a work permit to work in Canada. You're not getting them a work permit to work outside of Canada. They're working outside of Canada. You're going to have to find whatever requirements they need from that country for that. But these are people who are coming to work in Canada. So their wages should be paid in Canadian dollars. Okay. So Nicola's asking, confused with low wage and high wage and low skilled and high skilled. It's only low wage and high wage. That's what they're called. They're no longer low skilled or high skilled. I mean, we call them, I mean, colloquially low skill or high skill because it normally corresponds if you have a high wage, it's a high wage, it's a high skill occupation, or if it's a low skill, it's a low wage occupation. But if you wanna to avoid confusion, just use the word low wage and high wage. When you look at the LMIA, you're gonna find a form for low wage LMIA, requirements for low wage LMIA, requirements for high wage LMIA. Don't worry about that distinction. And okay, and here's where it gets interesting. So is cook on its own a low wage? No, it's not. It depends on how much they're paying them. If you go to the provincial median and it's $22 and the company is proposing to pay them $20, then it's going to be a low wage occupation. If they're going to be paying them $25, which is above the median, it's going to be a high wage occupation. That's why they changed it. Because before with the LMOs, it used to be the low skilled, high skilled, and some NOC Vs would be this, and the NOC A's and Zero would be that. NOC C's would be the other one. So it led to a lot of confusion. Because what if you're paying a cook really well? Does that mean that they should still be treated the same way as others? So the government said, like, we're not going to go with skills. We're going to go with wages. So what determines if it's one or the other is not the position. It's how much is being paid. And what determines it is not the median either. The median for a cook could be $18. That is in most cases below the median for the province. Okay, but that's not what's going to determine whether it's a low wage or high wage LMIA. What determines it is how much your employer is paying this person. And if your employer is paying this person $27 and that's above the median, then that's going to be a high wage occupation. They would be under the 10. Yeah, so I mean, we'll talk about the requirements of that, but yeah, don't worry. Just because it's cook, for instance, as I told you, we've done a lot of cook LMIAs for one of our clients. Some of them are high wage, some of them are low wage. It depends on how much our employer is paying them, not the median or not the NOC itself. Very, yeah, an important question, because I remember like that conceptually you could be just like, oh, but this is like I mean, because you think about positions like a cook, like, I mean, you think a caregiver, well, that would be a low wage position. I mean, that's what comes to your mind. But if your employer happens to be paying that caregiver $30 an hour, then it's actually not a low wage LMIA, it's a high wage LMIA. Okay, so advertising requirements and recruitment efforts. So minimum 4 weeks of advertising unless you're exempt. And this is crucial. And I've seen, again, a lot of refusals because of this. To continue, my advice, continue advertising until the day you get the acceptance from Service Canada. If you look at their technical rules, it says that at least one of the platforms needs to continue advertising. But I don't do this because like it's too risky and people are inconsistent. I just do all of them. So since I have control over the job bank, because I always make them approve me as a representative on the job bank account, and we can talk a little bit more about how we create this. I can keep extending job bank. We get reminders 5 days before it expires. If all the other ones, I ask the clients to post. They're the ones who post on Indeed. They're the ones who post on Monster. They're the ones who post on Career Owl. The others, I tell them, make sure that you keep renewing. And at every stage, I always tell them, make sure you keep renewing. And if it's a platform that gives you an option to put many months, then tell them put 12 months from now. You can delete the ad later on if you want, if you're being pestered by too many CVs, but just do it that way. Okay.